In 1906, the American construction site was a place of astonishing physical effort. Every board was cut by hand. Every surface was sanded by hand. Every joint was planed by hand. A carpenter's day began with muscle and ended with exhaustion. The tools existed. The electricity existed. But almost no one had figured out how to put electricity into a tool small enough to carry onto a job site and strong enough to survive a full day of professional work. The portable power tool, as a category, barely existed. A handful of companies were experimenting with electric drills. A few stationary machines had been electrified in factory settings. But the idea that a single worker could walk onto a framing site carrying a powered saw, a powered sander, a powered planer, tools that could do in minutes what hand tools did in hours, that idea had not yet arrived. 3 men in Syracuse, New York, were about to build it. Raymond E. Porter, George G. Porter, and Frankie Cable were not industrialists. They were not backed by family wealth. They were not graduates of elite engineering programs with investors waiting in parlor rooms. They were 3 working men in upstate New York with a combined investment of $2,300 and access to a garage. In 1906, the 3 of them pooled that money and opened a jobbing machine and tool shop. A jobbing shop was exactly what it sounded like. Customers brought problems. The shop built solutions. If a local manufacturer needed a custom part machined, Porter and Cable machined it. If someone needed a device that did not exist yet, they figured out how to make one. Their first manufactured products were not power tools. They were pencil sharpeners. Electric pencil sharpeners, automatic tire pumps, gas lanterns, and a parking brake designed to fit Ford automobiles. George G. Porter, the more commercially minded of the 2 brothers, had designed the parking brake himself. The products were modest, the ambition behind them was not. The 3 founders were not content to remain a contract shop forever. They wanted to build products that carried their own name. By 1910, the garage operation had grown enough to sustain itself. The pencil sharpeners and tire pumps sold steadily. The jobbing work kept the machines running. But the company was still small, still local, still doing work that any competent machine shop in upstate New York could have done. Then in 1914, Porter Cable made its first deliberate move toward power tools. The company introduced an engine lathe, a machine designed for high-volume turning operations. The lathe sold well. It established Porter Cable as a manufacturer of serious industrial equipment, not just novelty consumer products. The shift was subtle but decisive. The company had found its direction. In 1916, a Syracuse businessman named Walter A. Ridings purchased the company and became its president. Ridings had spent years working for Syracuse Supply and had served as president of the Manufacturing Association of Syracuse. He understood manufacturing at a level the 3 founders, gifted as they were with machines, had not yet reached. He understood markets, he understood timing, and he understood that the future of American industry was going to be shaped by one thing above all others: portable electric power. Ridings kept the founders involved. He did not gut the operation or rename it. He built on what they had started. His first major decision was to purchase a dedicated factory on North Salina Street in Syracuse. The garage era was over. Porter Cable now had a real production floor, real capacity, and a president who intended to use both. In 1919, Ridings acquired Mulliner Enlund Tool Company, a Syracuse firm that manufactured tool room lathes. The acquisition doubled Porter Cable's workforce overnight. It also came at a difficult moment. The machine tool industry had entered a prolonged depression following the end of the First World War. Military contracts had dried up. Civilian demand had not yet recovered. Companies across the Northeast were contracting or closing. Ridings did not contract. He expanded. In 1921, he introduced a line of portable power tools, pushing the company into a market that barely existed yet. In 1922, he acquired the assets of Syracuse Sander Manufacturing Company, a local maker of stationary belt and disc sanders. The acquisition gave Porter Cable an established product line, an existing customer base, and a body of engineering knowledge about abrasive finishing that would prove critical within a few years. Throughout the early 1920s, the stationary sanders acquired from Syracuse Sander became Porter Cable's most successful products. But Ridings was not thinking about stationary machines. He was watching the construction industry. He was watching carpenters haul lumber to fixed saws and drag unfinished boards to bolted-down sanders. He was watching the same pattern that every power tool visionary of the early 20th century eventually noticed. The work went to the machine never went to the work. Ridings wanted to reverse that. He needed an engineer who could build the machines that would make it possible. In the mid-1920s, he found one. Art Emmons was a young mechanical engineer when Walter Ridings hired him as Porter Cable's chief engineer. He was not famous. He had no reputation outside Syracuse. He had no published papers, no patents to his name, no industry connections that would have made him an obvious hire for a company betting its future on portable power tools. What he had was an obsessive understanding of how electric motors behaved under load, how power could be transferred through compact gear systems, and how a tool needed to feel in a human hand if a professional was going to hold it for 8 hours without stopping. Ridings gave Emmons a directive: focus on the two most physically punishing tasks in woodworking, sawing and sanding. Build tools that a single worker could carry to the job site, plug into an outlet and use all day. Make them light enough to hold. Make them powerful enough to cut and sand hardwood. Make them durable enough to survive professional abuse. Emmons started with sanding. In 1926, Porter Cable introduced the Takeabout sander. It was the first portable electric belt sander ever built. The name said everything. A sander you could take about. A sander that went to the work, not the other way around. The machine was designated the Model B5. It used a 3-inch by 24-inch belt driven by a half-horsepower General Electric motor. The motor was mounted vertically and the drive system was a worm gear in its purest form. No chains, no sprockets, no intermediate gears. Engine power went straight to the drive pulley through a worm drive mechanism that was as mechanically elegant as it was simple. The B5 weighed 14 pounds. It was built from sand castings, which meant every part required extensive handwork to finish. The castings were polished to a mirror finish by workers on the factory floor. Each sander was, in effect, a handcrafted machine. The fit between individual components was so precise that parts were marked with red grease pencil during assembly to keep matched sets together. A housing from one B5 could not simply be swapped onto another. They were fitted to each other like the parts of a fine firearm. The price reflected the craftsmanship. A B5 cost $78 in 1926. Adjusted for inflation, that is roughly $1,400 in today's money. More than a month's wages for a skilled tradesman. The tool was not cheap. It was not designed to be cheap. It was designed to be the best sanding machine a professional could hold in his hands, and it was. Art Emmons was 26 years old when he designed it. The Takeabout sander was followed almost immediately by the B4, a larger version with a 4-inch by 27-inch belt and a full 1-horsepower motor. The B4 weighed 23 pounds. It was a B5 built for heavier work, designed for doors, countertops, and large panels where the narrower B5 could not cover enough surface quickly enough. In 1927, Emmons turned his attention to cutting. Porter Cable introduced the Quicksaw, a lightweight portable circular saw with a then-novel automatic retracting blade guard. The guard was a safety innovation. Previous portable saws, to the extent they existed at all, left the blade exposed during and after the cut. The Quicksaw's guard retracted as the blade entered the material and snapped back into place the moment the cut was complete. The blade was covered when the tool was not cutting. The concept is so fundamental to modern circular saw design that it is now required by law in most countries. In 1927 it was new, but Emmons was not finished with the circular saw. He had studied the worm drive saws that the Skillsaw Company had been selling with considerable success. The worm drive placed the motor behind the blade, transmitting power through a worm gear at a right angle. The design was powerful but heavy, and the motor's position made the saw long and cumbersome for one-handed operation. Emmons designed a different approach. In 1928, he introduced the helical-drive circular saw. Instead of a worm gear, the saw used helical gears, angled tooth gears that transmitted power more smoothly, with less vibration and in a more compact package. The motor sat parallel to the blade instead of perpendicular to it. The result was a saw that was lighter, more balanced, and small enough to operate comfortably with one hand. The helical-drive circular saw became the most widely adopted circular saw design in the world. Every modern sidewinder circular saw, every compact circular saw sold at every hardware store on Earth descends from the design Art Emmons built in a Syracuse factory in 1928. The saw went to the work. The work stopped going to the saw. The entire construction industry reorganized around that single design change. The framing carpenter who had hauled lumber to a stationary table saw now carried a Porter cable helical drive saw to the lumber. The trim carpenter who had dragged door frames to a fixed sander now ran a takeabout across the door frame where it hung. The job site itself changed, the workflow changed, the economics of building a house changed. Porter Cable had not just built new tools, it had built new ways of working. In 1932, Emmons introduced the B10, a complete redesign of the portable belt sander. The B10 incorporated dust collection, a feature that no portable sanding machine had offered before. The motor was mounted horizontally along the long axis of the frame, which required an entirely new gear train using an intermediate helical gear to drive the belt pulley. The gear was a precision component, rotating on miniature magneto bearings. The engineering was meticulous. The B10 also used a rubber-coated idler pulley, which gave it an ability the earlier sanders had lacked. It could sand inside curves, it could edge sand with an optional stand. It could do finish work that previously required hand sanding or a trip to a stationary machine. The B10 weighed 21 pounds, ran a 3-inch by 27-inch belt at nearly 1,500 feet per minute, and drew power from a 1-horsepower motor. It was the most sophisticated portable sander in the world. Through the 1930s, Porter Cable continued to expand under Walter Riding's leadership. In 1933, the company formed the Syracuse Tool Electric Manufacturing Corporation, a separate entity that produced consumer items like electric hedge trimmers. In 1938, Ridings created the Syracuse Guild Tool Company as a Porter Cable subsidiary. The Guild line was designed to bring Porter Cable quality to the home workshop at a lower price point. The thinking was practical. Porter Cable's professional tools were expensive. A B5 sander cost more than most home workshop enthusiasts could justify. But Ridings anticipated that millions of American homeowners would want power tools in their garages. The Guild line offered lighter-weight, lower-cost versions of Porter Cable's professional products. Built in the same Syracuse factory, using the same engineering principles, but finished to a standard that allowed a lower retail price. In 1939, Porter Cable acquired Sterling Tool Products Company, a manufacturer of pneumatic and electric handheld sanders. The acquisition broadened the company's product range and gave it access to Sterling's manufacturing processes and dealer network. The Second World War transformed American manufacturing. Factories that had built consumer products shifted to military production. Porter Cable's Syracuse factory was kept extremely busy during the war years, manufacturing essential equipment for the war effort. The company's capacity for precision machining, its trained workforce, and its engineering expertise in compact electric motors made it a valuable contributor to wartime production. Portable power tools were needed in military construction, in shipyards, in aircraft factories, and in field repair operations across every theater of the war. The same machines that had built suburban homes in the 1930s were now building the infrastructure of a global military campaign. The war also accelerated the development of new materials and manufacturing techniques. Aluminum alloys improved, electric motor designs became more efficient. Production methods that had been adequate for small batch manufacturing were refined into processes that could produce hundreds of units per week without sacrificing quality. When the war ended, Porter Cable carried those improvements back into its civilian product line. When the war ended in 1945, Porter Cable returned to civilian production with an expanded manufacturing base, a workforce that had been sharpened by the demands of military specification, and a reputation for precision engineering that the war years had only reinforced. The company entered the post-war era as one of North America's largest makers of portable power tools. The late 1940s and 1950s were Porter Cable's golden age. The American construction industry exploded. The GI Bill sent millions of veterans into new homes. Suburbs materialized across the country. Roads, schools, hospitals, commercial buildings. The physical infrastructure of modern America was being built at a pace that had no precedent. Every construction site needed portable power tools. Every framing crew needed circular saws. Every finishing crew needed sanders. Every cabinet shop needed routers and planers. The demand for reliable, professional-grade portable tools was enormous, and Porter Cable was positioned at the exact center of that demand. The numbers tell the story of what was happening outside the factory walls. Between 1945 and 1960, the United States built more than 15 million new homes. Entire towns appeared where farmland had been the year before. Levittown, New York alone saw 17,000 houses constructed in 4 years. The pace was relentless. Builders who had framed 10 houses a year before the war were now framing 50. Speed mattered. Efficiency mattered. A circular saw that let one carpenter do the work of 2 was not a luxury. It was the only way the houses got built on schedule. Porter Cable's Speedmatic line of circular saws became the standard on American framing sites through this period. The Speedmatic name had been used since the late 1920s, and by the 1950s it was synonymous with the helical-drive saw that Emmons had invented. The saws were recognizable on any job site by their distinctive cast aluminum housings, and their reputation for cutting straight through dimensional lumber all day without overheating, without bogging down, without the blade wandering offline. The company's product line expanded steadily through the 1950s. Routers became a core category. Porter Cable routers were built with the same over-engineered philosophy that had defined the take-about sanders and the helical-drive saws. Cast housings, precision bearings, motors wound to deliver consistent power under sustained load. The routers became, over time, among the most respected tools the company produced. Professional woodworkers who bought a Porter Cable router in the 1950s were still using the same machine decades later. Cabinet shops across the country standardized on Porter Cable routers because the tools delivered the same cut quality on the 1,000th pass that they delivered on the first. In 1953, Porter Cable introduced another first. The company built the first portable bandsaw. A bandsaw is a continuous loop blade running over 2 wheels used for cutting curves, irregular shapes, and materials too thick or too awkward for a circular saw. Bandsaws had existed as stationary machines for over a century. Porter Cable made one you could carry. The portable bandsaw was not a miniaturized version of a floor-standing machine. It was a completely new tool category. The engineering required to fit a continuous blade, 2 tracking wheels, a drive motor, and a tensioning system into a package light enough to hold in 2 hands was substantial. The portable bandsaw gave plumbers, electricians, and metalworkers a cutting tool they had never had before. A tool that could cut pipe, conduit, angle iron, and bar stock on site, without hauling the material back to a shop. The pattern was unmistakable. Every major tool Porter Cable introduced followed the same logic. Find a task that requires a worker to bring the material to a stationary machine. Build a machine small enough and strong enough to bring to the material instead. Reverse the workflow. Give the worker back his time. The belt sander had done it for surface finishing. The helical-drive circular saw had done it for straight cuts. The portable band saw did it for curve cuts and metal cutting. Each tool eliminated a trip to the shop. Each tool kept the worker on the job site. Each tool made the construction process faster without making it less precise. By the late 1950s, Porter Cable had grown into one of the most respected power tool manufacturers in America. The company was still headquartered in Syracuse. The factory on North Salina Street was still producing tools. Walter Ridings had served as president for over 40 years. The workforce had expanded to fill multiple buildings. The product catalogue covered circular saws, belt sanders, finishing sanders, routers, planers, drills, bandsaws, and a range of accessories and attachments. The tools were sold through professional dealers and industrial supply houses. Porter Cable did not chase the consumer market with its professional line. The company had the Guild's subsidiary for home workshop tools, and the professional products were priced and positioned for contractors, cabinet makers, and industrial users who needed tools that would survive daily professional use. In 1952, Porter Cable sold its floor sanding machine line to Clark Sanding Machine Company. The following year, the company sold its stationary abrasive machine line to the Engelberg-Huller Company, also based in Syracuse. These divestitures were not signs of weakness, they were strategic decisions. Porter Cable was narrowing its focus to the category it dominated, portable power tools. The company was shedding product lines that distracted from that focus. By the end of the 1950s, Porter Cable was a mature, profitable, focused company. It had spent 54 years in Syracuse. It had introduced the world's first portable belt sander, the world's first helical-drive circular saw, and the world's first portable band saw. It had built a product line that professional woodworkers, carpenters, and contractors trusted with their livelihoods. The tools were overbuilt by design. A Porter Cable circular saw from the 1950s was not a disposable commodity. It was a precision instrument with cast metal housings, hand-fitted components, and motors built to run for decades. The company published parts diagrams and maintained parts availability for tools years after they left the production line. A professional who bought a Porter Cable knew that the tool could be rebuilt, not just replaced. The company stood behind the machine for the life of the machine. Through the decades that followed, Porter Cable's innovations continued to define what portable power tools could be. In 1963, the company introduced the first high-speed handheld finishing sander. The finishing sander filled a gap between the aggressive stock removal of a belt sander and the delicate touch of hand sanding. It vibrated at high speed rather than running a continuous belt, producing a smoother finish with less risk of gouging. For furniture makers, cabinet builders, and anyone doing fine woodworking, the finishing sander became indispensable. The company's router line continued to evolve. Porter Cable routers became the standard in professional woodworking shops across America. The tools were heavy, solid, and precise. They accepted a wide range of bits and accessories. They ran cool under sustained load. They did not flex, chatter, or wander. The 690 series router, introduced later, would become one of the most widely used routers in the history of American woodworking. It was not flashy. It was not marketed with superlatives. It was simply the router that worked. Every time, for years, and then for years after that. In 1985, Porter Cable introduced the Model 518, a 3-horsepower router with internal microprocessor technology and a digital readout. It was one of the first portable power tools in the world to incorporate electronic controls for speed management. The microprocessor monitored load and adjusted motor output to maintain consistent speed under varying cutting conditions. A router cutting through hard maple behaved the same way as a router cutting through soft pine. The operator set the speed. The electronics held it there. In 1987, Porter Cable introduced the first affordable portable plate joiner in North America. The plate joiner, also called a biscuit joiner, was a European tool concept that used a small circular blade to cut crescent-shaped slots into the edges of boards. An oval wooden biscuit inserted into matching slots aligned and strengthened the joint. The technique was faster than doweling, cleaner than pocket screws, and stronger than glue alone. European woodworkers had used plate joiners for years, but the tools were expensive imports. Porter Cable built a domestic version at a price point that put biscuit joinery within reach of every professional cabinet shop and serious home workshop in America. In 1992, Porter Cable introduced the first palm grip electric random orbit sander. The random orbit sander combined rotary and orbital motion to produce a swirl-free finish that no single-action sander could match. The palm grip design let the operator sand with one hand, reducing fatigue and improving control on vertical surfaces and overhead work. The tool was compact, aggressive enough for stock removal, and refined enough for final finishing. It became one of the best-selling sander designs in the industry. A Porter Cable router from this era was not a tool a professional replaced when a new model came out. It was a tool a professional used until it wore out, and then had rebuilt and then used again. The rebuild culture was part of the Porter Cable identity. The company designed its tools to be serviced, not discarded. Bearings could be replaced, brushes could be changed, armatures could be rewound. A tool that broke was a tool that went to a repair bench, not a landfill. This philosophy, building tools that lasted long enough to be rebuilt and supporting them with parts long enough to make rebuilding worthwhile, was not universal in the power tool industry. It was a choice. It cost more to engineer tools for serviceability. It cost more to maintain parts inventories for decades. It cost more to train authorized repair technicians to work on machines that other companies would have simply discontinued. Porter Cable made that choice, and professional tradespeople across America recognized it. The tools were not cheap. They were never the cheapest option on the shelf. But the professionals who used them understood the math. A tool that costs twice as much and lasts 10 times as long is not expensive. It is the least expensive option available. In 1996, the Smithsonian Institution established a collection of materials from Porter Cable's 90-year history. It was the first time the Smithsonian had created an archived collection for a power tool company. The curators who organized the exhibit understood what Porter Cable's tools represented. They were not just industrial products, they were artifacts of the American construction industry itself. The takeabout sander, the helical-drive saw, the portable bandsaw, these machines had physically built the country. The houses Americans lived in, the schools their children attended, the offices they worked in had been cut, sanded, routed, and finished with tools that traced their lineage to a garage in Syracuse and a 26-year-old engineer named Emmons. The collection preserved not just the tools themselves, but the engineering drawings, the catalogues, the factory photographs, and the documentation that recorded how a $2,300 investment in 1906 had become one of the most consequential power tool companies in American history. Porter Cable did not build the most tools. It did not sell the most units. It did not achieve the highest revenue in its industry. What it did was solve problems that no one else had solved yet, and build the solutions to last. The first portable belt sander, the first helical-drive circular saw, the first portable band saw, the first high-speed finishing sander, the first affordable plate joiner in North America, the first palm grip random orbit sander, each one a tool that did not exist before Porter Cable built it. Each one a tool that became so fundamental to professional woodworking and construction that the industry cannot imagine functioning without it. The Model 504 belt sander, a direct descendant of the original takeabout, earned the nickname the locomotive among professionals who used it. The name stuck because the tool looked like a small locomotive and because it ran with the same relentless, unstoppable power. A carpenter who owned a locomotive did not own a sanding machine. He owned a piece of Porter Cable's founding promise, cast in metal and wound in copper. still doing in the 1990s exactly what Art Emmons had designed it to do in the 1920s. The Porter band, the portable band saw that descended from the 1953 original, became equally iconic. Plumbers and pipe fitters across America called it by name, not by category. They did not say, "Hand me the portable bandsaw." They said, "Hand me the Porter band." The tool had become the word for the tool. That does not happen to products that are merely adequate. That happens to products that are irreplaceable. Raymond Porter, George Porter, and Frank Cable started with $2,300 and a garage. Walter Ridings bought the company and gave it direction. Art Emmons gave it genius. The factory on North Salina Street gave it scale. The professionals who bought the tools and used them until the castings wore smooth gave it a reputation that no marketing campaign could have manufactured. The reputation was not built on advertising. It was not built on brand partnerships or retail placement or corporate acquisitions. It was built the same way every lasting reputation in the tool industry has ever been built. One tool at a time, one job site at a time, one carpenter picking up a Porter cable saw, cutting with it all day, and finding that it was still cutting clean at the end of the shift. That is not a brand strategy. That is 54 years of three men's names on a factory in Syracuse, New York, and every tool that came out of it built as if the names on the building were a personal guarantee. Because they were.